Has always been the Islamic regime in Iran. But from Iran's new president, Hassan Rowhani, the world heard a curiously neutral statement that could even have been interpreted as welcoming U.S. military action against the Assad regime.
Iran, which is a victim of chemical weapons itself, reminds the entire international community to use whatever is in its power to prevent use of such weapons anywhere, especially in Syria.
Yet from Ali Larijani, Speaker of the Iranian parliament, came a direct threat against Washington's staunchest Mideast ally, Israel.
The Islamic Parliament, while condemning such a rushed and illegitimate planning by America and the West, warns that you might start a military operation against Syria, but you will not be the ones who will end the war. You also need to be worried about your illegitimate Zionist child in the region.
Syria has also vowed to lash out at Israel, and the Assad regime's UN envoy blamed the Israelis for the current crisis.
The only party that benefits from this instability in the area is the continuation of the Israeli policies of occupation of the Arab-occupied territories.
In Tel Aviv, citizens began lining up to protect themselves against more chemical attacks, even as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu tweeted, "Pursuant to security consultation held, there is no reason to change daily routines. At same time, we are prepared for any scenario."
This is taking place in a region that's already incredibly destabilized, taking place in a country that borders many countries, our allies and friends that we work closely with together. So we believe that it's important that we send a strong message that this type of mass-scale, indiscriminate use of chemical weapons is not acceptable.
Stymied at the UN Security Council by Syria's patron and ally Russia, the U.S. now intends to bypass the Security Council altogether. President Obama's critics argue his inaction to date in the Syrian conflict could now cause a bigger geopolitical ripple effect when he does act. Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany, where there is strong opposition to a strike against Syria, joined the British Prime Minister David Cameron today in agreeing that the Syrian regime should not go unpunished. Their willingness to proceed absent a UN Security Council resolution, however, stands in stark contrast to the insistence on such authorization that European leaders maintained a decade ago when the Bush-Cheney administration readied for war in Iraq. Brett?
James Rosen live at the State Department. James, thank you. Insiders predict any action against Syria will probably be limited and brief. It's just a prediction, though. Tonight, Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge tells us a review of limited military strikes shows they can have severe and unintended consequences where America's enemies double down rather than retreat.
As the Obama administration weighs its response to Syria's alleged use of chemical weapons, the State Department acknowledged the risk.
There are a variety of factors that go into that determination. Possible unintended consequences, possible effects in the region. All of that is part of this big picture that we look at.
Among the compelling examples, the Clinton administration's response to these simultaneous truck bombings of the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in 1998, which left 223 dead and more than 4,000 injured. This pharmaceutical factory in the Sudan, believed at the time to produce chemical weapons, and training camps in Afghanistan were bombed in retaliation. With hindsight, observers say the Clinton missile strikes strengthened the bond between the Taliban and al-Qaeda, paving the way for the USS Cole bombing in 2000 and a decision by al-Qaeda to bring terrorism to America's shores.
You were going to use limited military power in order to send a signal. In this case, it was that al-Qaeda will not be allowed to threaten the United States. Well, the immediate aftermath is that the organization actually becomes emboldened.
The Reagan administration took a similar tack after the bombing of this West Berlin disco in 1986. 2 of the dead were U.S. servicemen, and many of the 79 injured were permanently disabled. With the evidence pointing to the former Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi, President Reagan launched retaliatory strikes on Benghazi and Tripoli.
Today, we have done what we had to do. If necessary, we shall do it again.
2 years later, a Libyan agent bombed Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland, killing 259 on board and 11 people on the ground.
Acting tactically rather than strategically almost certainly risks causing more harm than good. We see that in our current situation in Syria.
And while there's no question the U.S. military can pull off a limited strike, analysts say the short-term satisfaction can often be outweighed by the long-term consequences and the very real likelihood of retaliation against U.S. interests. Brad.
Catherine, thank you. Wall Street recovered a bit.